This week on Gravel, we've got a number of stories about pigs that you cannot miss because you're going to want to tell your buddies, this happened to me. Also, I tell everyone about how I shot my first elk and I get to be part of the new Wapiti Club. And we go over in detail how to get and give guns for Christmas.
This thing on? Well, hey, old yellers. Welcome to another episode of On Gravel. We are in the virtual, I guess nothing virtual about it. I'm really in my office. Bronson's really in. Are you at home or your office?
I have an office at home now. We call it the study because we're trying to be real cultured, but I'm sitting at the top level of my house in my library study that's starting to come together. I have internet connection now, so it's like a real place.
Do you snicker every time the term stud-y is said?
I do. And since we're moving and we're hanging up pictures, I've got the stud finder out. And yes, every time I take it and I run it across me and I hit the button and make it beep as it's over me. And I said, found one. It's the oldest joke in the world, but
it's compulsory when you have that tool in your hand.
Yep.
And Dinger, are you at world headquarters at Powderhook?
I am. Global HQ.
All right.
Red dog in tow.
I have a black dog at my feet.
Nellie is kind of in lab jail because yesterday I was we were just putzing around. We had a bunch of stuff to do before I came into town, and she was just hanging out. Sound good? I went and took a shower. I got out of the shower. She was nowhere to be found. Couldn't find her for 3 hours. When she came back, she was as big around as a beer barrel. She had gotten into some sort of dead, putrid thing, and she's smelling like it now. Yeah. So, welcome to Nellie world.
Nelta. She's
well,
special.
That's just Labrador.
It's just Labrador. She's such a coyote.
Hey, before we get into the important topics of the day, does your dog stink? My dog farts. She is awesome. She sits right at my feet a lot, hangs out right by my desk a lot, but she farts all day long, and it's not like a kid fart where you're like, man, that stinks, but I still love my kid. It's like so putrid and off-putting that I have these just horrible thoughts about it. She's a wonderful dog, but she stinks.
What are you feeding her?
Dog food. She eats rawhides. I wonder if it's a rawhide.
Yep, that's it.
Is it? Dang, she smells.
Does she smell her own farts?
I mean, she can't not. The county can smell her farts.
Well, that's the early warning system with Nellie is before, maybe seconds before I smell it, she'll reach around and give her old bunghole a sniff. I'm like, okay, here it comes.
Oh, my God. She's a fart huffer?
Yeah. Yeah. Trade you dogs for a while.
I don't know if I could handle her.
So one of the things we thought we'd talk about today is, I don't quite know, maybe Dinger, you or Bronson can string out the rationale for this a little bit, but we thought we'd tell a couple of hog stories. Then we're going to go into a couple of other firsts. Bronson's had probably the most remarkable life of his big game career, I guess. So I'm eager to hear a little bit more about that. But why are we going to talk about hogs?
Well, because it's kind of that season where a lot of the other big game animals are coming to a close for a lot of us. And so this is kind of that time when people start thinking about alternative game species like wild hogs.
I like it. Well, I actually have two. I'm going to set the table with what's going on later after we hang up here. We've got the annual Christmas party for the Men's Resource Center here in Glasgow, Montana.
Glasgow?
Glassalegia. But the reason I'm bringing that up in the context of hogs is 2 years ago, members of the Men's Resource Center decided that we needed to do something as kind of off-season recreation. So in the doldrums of March, we all drove, there were 5 of us as I recall, we drove a Chevy Tahoe pulling a 14-foot trailer with a freezer and a generator in it to Oklahoma. And we waylaid hogs and butchered them on the site, and we filled the freezer and we drove home. At least that was the idea. we got there and we really couldn't find anywhere to hunt. We were kind of operating under the impression that you keep hearing that hogs are the scourge of the earth, and everybody just wants them gone, and people are just begging you to come and shoot them. And we thought, have freezer, we'll travel, we'll take care of your little problem. When we got there, of course, it was different. Oh yeah, you can hunt, but it's $250 a gun a day. You can only shoot the little ones. Anyway, there were all sorts of restrictions. We ended up having a guided hunt for one day, and we shot the hell out of the pigs, only to find out that it was $100 for every pig we shot. Nobody had told us that before we started opening up. Anyway, that was our experience with hogs. It was great. It was bonding time. But I think we ended up getting 6 hogs times $100, and some of these were like 22-pound hogs. And then we hunted with a friend of mine who had a place, didn't charge us for it, and we got 2 hogs there. So anyway, we did come back with some pork, but it wasn't quite the grocery shopping trip we expected it to be. So instead, I'm going to tell you about the most probably personality shaping experience of my childhood. So I grew up on a little farm, working farm, mixed use farm in North Missouri. We had cows and we had sheep for a while. We had pigs, we had chickens, row crops. We had corn and soybeans. We had a pretty big hay base. Anyway, we probably had, at the height of our hog operation, probably 12 farrowing pens and and sows, and we just basically raised little piglets and sold them when they got to about 80 pounds as feeder hogs, and it just was a pretty good supplement to the rest of the income. And all of us kids would trade off different jobs. I milked the cow most of the time, but I also would kind of cycle in and take care of the pigs. Anyway, one of the things that apparently I was good at, I don't know how this happened, was I was a pretty good pig castrator. So all the little barrows, little boar pigs, had to be castrated, and we had a way to do it where we would pluck them out of the farrowing pen, and my dad had made a little galvanized tin hoop nailed to a oak plank. So the deal is you stuck the little piglet down the front snout end down that tube so that his nether regions were sticking up at you, and you cut the balls off with a razor blade, squirt some iodine on it, and move on to the next one. Well, I don't know if you've ever castrated a little pig, but they make a lot of noise when you cut their balls off. And it was always kind of a lot of agitation going on in the farrowing house when this would happen, and those sows would huff at you and climb the walls of their pen and try to get at you. So you kind of had to be watching what was going on. Anyway, in the midst of one of these castrating operations, this little piglet was just squealing and screaming its lungs out. And we were busy, cutting nuts, and failed to realize that its mama had gotten out of the pen and was standing in the raceway of this barn where we were working. And my dad dropped the razor blade, and I dropped the pig, and we tried to get that sow's attention, but unfortunately it was locked onto my mom. And my mom realized that she was being run down by a boar rushing sow at about the same moment that we did. My mom ran out of the barn with that sow. This is probably a 550, 650 pound sow, hot on her heels. And they both ran around the corner of the barn and out of sight. So my dad and I dropped what we were doing. We ran after them, and we turned the corner to the house. And the only thing we could see was that sow trying to break the farmhouse door down, just charging it, just crashing it with her head. My dad grabbed a pitchfork as we were coming around the barn, and my dad ended up killing that sow with a pitchfork on the porch. And we got the farmhouse door open. We rushed in, and my mom was on the kitchen table with her hands on her ears, just screaming. And I eat as much bacon and sausage since then as I can.
Okay. Now I understand why you referred to Old Yeller when you did the intro today, because if you remember an Old Yeller, Travis was catching pigs and castrating them and marking their ears, and it reminded me of that. But of course, he got cut up and almost killed, and Old Yeller had to save his life. You kind of played the role, your dad played the role of Old Yeller coming to save your mom.
with a pitchfork. That was probably the most heroic thing I've ever seen. I mean, you think Poseidon is cool when your dad kills a enraged sow on your porch with a pitchfork? Like, that's hero stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It reminds me, for some reason, when I hear stories like that, it reminds me of the Dr. Seuss book. Oh, the places you'll go, the things you'll see.
Well, I can't stop seeing that. Okay, I got to jump back one story, because when you referred to the Men's Resource Center, I had this image of this social service agency that was helping destitute guys. Is this basically just your drinking buddies and Glass Cow?
I have. It's by the way, before you answer that, just so you know, I had Chicago bathhouse in my head. So
okay.
All right. So my office is on the second floor of an old bank building. When on the ground floor was the Women's Resource Center for years and years, and it was kind of a rape crisis response and like a counseling service, and it really did great things. I say this in the past tense because there was some like professional scale embezzling that happened, and they shut the whole place down. So it doesn't exist anymore. But when it was going, we thought, because we met and drank a lot of beer and talked about the world's problems upstairs of the Women's Resource Center, and we were all a bunch of dudes, that it would be really funny if we called ourselves the Men's Resource Center.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
no treasurer, no embezzlement so far. So we're still a going concern, and unfortunately, the Women's Resource Center is no more.
Who am I to criticize? You calling your group the Men's Resource Center? I was one of the founding members of a club named after spiders. So what do you do? All right. So my pig story.
Was I.
My pig story. So. A mutual friend of, I think, all three of us, Michael Kinn, he works for my company, but used to do PR for the company. I think you guys both know him. He grew up not far from where my farm is in central Minnesota, and he and I used to do a little duck hunting together, and we had a hunting trip scheduled. And I wasn't able to go. I had something come up at work, whatever it was. So he went up on his own, and he was going up to this little lake in north central Minnesota in Beltrami County, just outside of the town of Black Duck, Minnesota. Three Island Lake is the name of the lake. It's publicly accessible. Great bluebill, late season bluebill lake. It's a rice lake. Just awesome. So he was up there, and it was late season. So this is late October, which for us in Minnesota is late season. It was cold. Ice is, was starting to form on the edges of the lake. It was freezing and it was howling. But it was one of those trips when you time it just right, where the migration is coming through, and it's duck hunting in northern Minnesota. You're hunting nasty weather. So, but he was up there hunting by himself, and I was all worried about him. And no cell coverage in that part of the county at that time. He was out there, and he went out and he shot a limit of bluebills and had a great hunt. Knocked it off kind of early in the afternoon because he was worried about getting out. But it was getting dark, and he was driving out, and there's this big, long county road that goes. You'd normally think it's a Forest Service road, but it's just a county road that goes through state county timberland. It's just like a washboard road. And he's driving out on it, and driving not all that fast, but he's coming out, and all of a sudden, out of the ditch on this forest road, a pig comes out, and he hits it with his truck. And he hit it so hard that the boat on his trailer came loose and everything. And he had, manhandling a boat when it's not floating is a little hard to do. So he hopped out. He looked at the pig. Pig's dead. He goes back. He gets his boat back on there, and he's out in the middle of nowhere, no cell coverage, and he looks at this pig, and it's way bigger than he can handle. He can't pull it and get it in the back of his pickup. So he kind of pushes it off to the side of the road and leaves it. And this is a domestic pig. I don't know my pig species or breeds, but it's a clean, regular farm pig. So he drives out to the end of the road and heads down the gravel thinking he's going to find a farmer. He drives 8 miles and it can't find a farm, can't find anyone. So he looked around trying to find who to report that he'd hit this pig and tell him, hey, you got $1,000 worth of pork sitting out there or whatever. Can't find the farmers, looks forever. It's starting to snow, so he starts heading home, drives home, and just doesn't think anything of it. It's out in the middle of the woods. I'm sure, wolf country. I'm sure wolves or coyotes, got it and ate it, and it was over. So he felt bad, but, he did his due diligence. 3 weeks later, in the mail, he gets a summons from Beltrami County ordering him to appear in court for killing the pig. So he's like, well, man, it kind of sucks that I got to go to court. But, he gets all ready and, gets ready to go to court and loads up his, in the car and drives all the way up to Beltrami County. And he's going into court. Dinger?
So, a lot of questions. McKean, you don't have any questions about that?
Oh, I'm full of questions, but I'm just waiting. I don't want to be the guy, right? How did they find him? Is it illegal to hit and run a pig? I got a lot of questions. How did they find him?
Well, the pig, he squealed.
Come on.
Merry Christmas, listener.
That was so elaborate. Look, I had to tell my story as part of the setup. That's like next level stuff. Actually, that is next level. Something gave this whole thing away. It was the extremely pregnant pausing.
Yep, I ruined that. Sorry. I was waiting for you to say, well, how did they find out? Or how'd they know it was him? Which, on our pheasant hunt down in Kansas, like a total lemming, Bronson is just, or was it Ken? I can't remember.
Ken was telling the story.
Ken said it, and the other two guys in the truck had heard the story. This is a story, not a joke, for those of you who will retell this in all of its hilarity to your family over the holidays. This is a story. And so I'm just like a total lemming. I'm like, well, how in the world did they find out it was him? And they all start laughing. And you realize you're the butt of the joke as the punchline is coming and hitting you in the face.
I think that's honestly why I didn't want to ask, because I thought there was something there.
So we literally made you tell a pig story so that there would be context for Bronson's pig story.
I feel like you were part of this setup too.
Yeah, well,
I was trying.
Is this a conspiracy?
It is a conspiracy. If you'd have logged in, and for the staff meeting that we had before the podcast, you'd have, we wouldn't have had a chance to cook this up. What do you call?
Next time you hear a pig story or a pig joke or anybody says the word pig, you're going to remember this story and be thankful.
Well, that's part of the key. Is you got to have someone else bring up pigs so that it doesn't look like you're trying to bring it up. That way, it's just part of the setup. It's part of the long con. You got to look for your opportunity.
Is this whole podcast a setup for something else? Like how deep does this go?
Oh yeah,
we're in episode 16 of a very very elaborate long game.
We're not even recording at this point, but at this point, this is where I say, Andrew, are you familiar with Amway?
Well, I was going to talk about our big party, and I did invite Dinger. I don't know if you were aware of that. I remember I said there was going to be a lot of drinking, there was going to be some dancing, and probably quite a bit of sex.
Okay. And you invited Dinger?
Well, his question was, who else is going to be there? I said, well, nobody. It's just you and me.
So much hair to think through.
All right, Bronson, bring us back to earth. Tell us about your week, would you please, for the love of God.
So this week, I was flying out to. I flew to Denver and drove down to New Mexico. I was invited to go hunt elk on the Philmont Scout Ranch. And for people that aren't familiar with the Philmont Scout Ranch, it's a 250,000-acre ranch that was donated to the Scouts by Wade Phillips, who was an old oil guy that had a summer home there, and this was his working ranch. No oil on it that I'm aware of. I don't see any oil rigs, but it's working cattle ranch, and the Scouts have had that for ever, for coming up on 100 years. We're getting close. And it's one of the big high adventure camps where Scouts go camping every year. It's in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains near Cimarron, New Mexico. So I flew out there, flew to Denver and drove down. And on the flight, by the way, they had this really cool program about beavers. It was the best damn show I've ever seen. Anyway, so 5-day private land hunt in New Mexico, and hunting with some colleagues of mine from the shooting sports industry that support Boy Scouts. And it was kind of a shooting sports group that was all there. So I have, I disclosed to everyone coming into this, I had never killed an elk. I hunted elk 10 years ago, and great experience, great hunt, but didn't manage to close the deal on an elk. And I just haven't had the chance to hunt elk since then. I'm usually hunting birds and things in the season, but I got to go. And so I was hunting with a friend of mine. I didn't get permission to talk about him on the podcast, so I won't name him, but he knew that I had never killed an elk. So he said, before we went out the first day, he says, "All right, you're on the gun until you get one, and then I'll get the next one." And awesome. So I got to shoot first. So we went out early morning, went out up these canyons in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, scrub oak, especially where there's been fires over the years, and then pine slopes and lots of elevation, lots of canyons, lots of creeks, just really good elky country. And we went out the first day, and we saw a few groups of bulls, and the weather was not terribly bad. Up high, there wasn't a lot of snow. There was some snow, but not a lot. So the elk were not getting pushed down. So they were coming down and feeding at night, and heading back up early. So it's hard to get ahead of them. But we found a group of 3 bulls, and they were all at least 6x6s, all 3 of them together. And we spotted them early in the morning, and we worked our way up the mountain to get above them, trying to cut them off before they headed up and over the ridge. And we managed to get up above them, and I think they spotted us because they stopped coming up slope and turned around and went back down into a bowl. So we ate lunch, and we went down and we worked the edge of the bowl, going slow, glassing along, and we spotted one of the bulls bedded down. And this was on the north slope of the bowl, so there was a lot of snow in that part. But he was underneath a pine tree where it was bare ground, so he was bedded on the bare ground. Range found him 230 yards. I got down on the sticks, and my buddy and the guy that was with us, he's a ranch hand. He works at the ranch. They said, "All right, let us know before you shoot." So I got him in the scope. I'm looking at him. I'm dead level right on his chest, because 230, that's, it's a couple inches off, from center from where it should be. I was sighted in 200. And I'm getting ready, and I said, "All right, guys," I clicked the safety off. I said, "Okay, I'm going to shoot." And as soon as I do that, I start shaking, and my heart starts pounding like crazy. It was like I was 12 years old in the deer woods again. It was just, once I made the decision, okay, I'm gonna shoot this elk. I'm gonna shoot my first elk. I just got the biggest case of elk fever I've ever, maybe anyone's ever experienced. And so now, unlike when I was 12 years old, I didn't fight through it. I stopped. The elk was bedded. It's laying on the ground. It's not panicked. Doesn't know we're there. Not going anywhere. I got a chance. So I bring my head up off the sticks and off the gun and put it back on safe, and I just start taking some deep breaths, turn my head so that I'm not blowing on my scope. And I look at the guys that are with me, and they're all on their binoculars, and I said, guys, I just need a moment. And everyone's like, okay, take your time, take your time. And I bet I took 30 seconds, 45 seconds. It seemed like 2 hours, but I got calmed down. I stopped shaking a little bit. I got back down on the sticks, looked through it, heart's still pounding, but I'm not shaking so bad. Click off the safety, level the scope right where I want it. I'm going around in those little circles in the scope. I've got it on 9 power, and but I'm feeling good. I squeeze the trigger, and I feel really good about it. Whump! You hear the thwap, and I lever it out, and I get up on him. I'm looking at him, and he's tipped over, and everyone's like, "I think he's down. I think he's down." It looked like a good hit, and I'm starting to calm down, and the post-kill shakes are starting to come on. And by God, if that elk doesn't roll back over and start to try to get his feet underneath him, and so he's still broadside. So guide says, put another one in him, and I get up and I shoot, put another one in him. I feel good about that one too. Hear the thwack, know he's hit, and he keeps trying to get up. So I lever in that third round, and I'm shooting a 300 short mag. So the gun in the magazine only holds 3 rounds. So I got 3 rounds in my gun because I'm driving around not with one in the tube. I've just got the magazine loaded. So I put the third one in, and I squeezed the trigger, and I rushed it. I missed him. I knew I missed him. So then I'm reaching into my pack to grab more shells, and I'm loading 3 more shells in, and he's down and on his back, and his feet are in the air, and I'm thinking, okay, he's done. He's down. But I reload the gun and get it up, and I'm sitting there, and I don't have the gun on the sticks. I'm still watching him, and by God, he gets on his feet. He stands up. Whoa. And turns to his right. So my first 2 shots went through. Turns to my left. My first 2 went through. I thought good vital hits on the right side. Now he's going the other way. So now he's going left. I've got 3 rounds in my gun. I put one in him. Second shot I miss. Again, that one I shot high. I was rushing. He's taken a couple steps. So third one, now I'm thinking, okay, I'm about to empty my gun for the second time. I'm on bullet number 6, and I bear down, I squeeze, lay it right behind the shoulder, pull the trigger, and boom, he goes down. So then he's down and out for the count. So we watched him for a little while from 230 yards away, and didn't see him moving, couldn't see chest heaving anymore, and so we start doing the high fives and the hugging and everything else. And that's kind of the first time that I noticed that the canyon that I'm shooting across is not an easy place to get across. I mean, there's rim rock and there's nasty stuff, and there's it's a drainage that goes through there. Elk's down. I take one out of the chamber. I reload my rifle for the third time. So I've got 3 in the magazine. I don't put one in the chamber. I close it, grab my pack, and I said, "All right, guys, I'm going to my elk." And so the guide and my buddies that are with me are coming. I beat everybody to the elk. I was frankly a little bit reckless going down that canyon, but I wanted to get to my first elk. I was so excited. Got up, didn't break my neck, but I certainly could have, as I was doing some technical 3-point crawling down and up. But got up, walked up on the elk, had my rifle, and it was awesome because everyone was at least 50 yards behind me. So I got that little moment to myself, and I did pull out my phone and I did record it as I walked up on it. I think I might have texted you guys that video, or maybe I put But yeah. I just recorded that little moment and then walked up on him and got to spend a couple minutes with him before everyone else got up there. And we got there, we did the celebrating, and then started the work of I've never broke down an elk. And so we did the photos. And first of all, the sun was terrible the way he dropped. It was right behind, us. So we had to spin this elk, which is not, when you got 4 guys there, you can do it. I would have been, if I had moved that elk by myself, I don't know how I would have gotten decent pictures, but we did that. and then we radioed in and called the horse team because getting him out was gonna. I mean, we could have packed him down slope in multiple trips, but we had horses available, so we called them, and we had to wait a little while for them to get there. But in the meantime, we broke the elk down. When the horses got there, they had a little portable sawzall. And so we were able to quarter up that elk, split him up the middle into actual quarters and get him loaded up. So slick, it was nice. Luxury that you don't have if you're not going in, with pack animals, I guess. But so I got that experience and got to do all that. I really felt like, even though this was a private land hunt where we were traveling around mostly in trucks and in glass, and I got to have that experience of having to get it off the mountain the hard way and doing all that. It was pretty exciting, and it was it was a big sense of accomplishment for me because I've for the last 10 years since I didn't get an elk the last time I hunted, I felt like I had unfinished business on the mountain, and now I feel like, okay, I can call myself an elk hunter. So that's the story of my first elk.
And now you get to enjoy it the rest of the year. Pretty good growth.
I do. That was one of the other great things is they butchered it right there at Philmont because it's a working cattle ranch, so they've got butchering facilities right there, and I am having every ounce of meat shipped back to me here over the next week. So I was tempted to stay an extra day and then drive all the way home, but my family kind of wanted me back home, so I'm gonna pay the shipping costs. But it's we are looking forward to a year's worth of elk.
Pretty exciting. So will you be going again?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I will. I will hunt elk again. I haven't bow hunted very much the last couple of years, but I really kind of want to do that bow hunting for elk in the rut. Just because it was when you're hunting that big country and you're covering ground and you're just glass and looking for elk because they're not talking. The only time I heard any vocalizations from elk is when we would find some groups of cows. The cows would communicate back and forth. Yeah,
chirp and mew.
And but there's no bugles or anything in that part. So I'm kind of excited about trying to do that, but that means I'm gonna have to start practicing with the bow again. But yeah, I'm absolutely gonna do it again. It was epic, and I want to feel that again because it was so much fun. Every day we were up there on the mountain, and so I stayed for a couple of days hunting with my buddy who finally ended up. He killed an 8x7 bull, really good bull. I have no idea what any of them scored. I imagine at some point someone will put tape on them, but I didn't care about what mine scored. But his was a good bull, and same deal. We killed it across the canyon that required horses and all. He shot his bull at 9 a.m. I shot mine at 1 in the afternoon. We didn't get off the mountain until just before dark on his bull, even though we killed it early and we're working on it. It just because it took that long to get the horses up there to us, and then that much longer to get the horses back. But it was fun. It was fun spending time with the horses and guys that have broken down a few elk. And I tell you, I jumped in, into the gutting process too, and that was holy crap. Holy crap! Is it big? I couldn't believe how far you had to reach to cut things out.
So I'm curious about the Sawzall. So did you not just pop the hip socket to get that back quarter off, or did you square it off with the Sawzall?
What they ended up doing is they cut right behind one of the last ribs, not the absolute last rib, and they cut off right across through the backbone. And so they ended up splitting the back straps, front and back, and then split it with the Sawzall like you'd split a cow with a bandsaw.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Which I thought was interesting. But no, that's what we would have done if we were in backcountry and couldn't get the horses to us, I guess. But since we had the Sawzall there, we didn't do it that way. We cut it right at the rib and took the whole hindquarter and part of the back straps with it. So my experience is you get the hide off, you pop out the back straps, the whole thing on a deer, and then you pop the joints and get the hind quarter off and the front quarters, and they actually sawed them up. So I realize that's probably not how you do it everywhere, but that's how they did it, and it worked pretty slick.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a animal? This is a little bit of a weird question maybe, but do you have an animal that you have hunted that you revere, that you just really are awed by?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's been a few probably for each of us, but what's yours, Andrew?
I mean, really, it's the pronghorn antelope. I'm just so enchanted by that animal. I think its ability to make a living in what looks like scab land in a lot of places, but just I like the way they behave. I love using terrain to get in on them, but when I have one down and start taking it apart, I'm amazed at, for instance, the size of the windpipe is so ludicrously large given the size of the animal, but that's how they exchange so much oxygen to run at the speeds they do. The heart is so much bigger than you would expect. So just anatomically, I'm just fascinated by them.
Bronson, what about you?
Well, I certainly feel quite a bit of reverence for a bunch of species, but I got to say the one thing that I kind of always wanted to hunt just because of the inhospitability of where they live was wild chuckers. And I managed to get one a couple years ago, and I'd like to do it again, but I think I need to run a couple marathons like Andrew first to get into shape to do it again, because they live on top of the mountains, and they are an evil little bird. They just sit up on top of the mountain and laugh at you. They chuckle at you, and then they always wait until you're to the top of the mountain, and then they fly over the other side and go to the bottom. But I think just the kinds of places they live, I'm pretty fascinated by them. But I don't know. I used to feel that way about cinnamon teal, but now I've gotten a cinnamon teal. So, have you gotten a cinnamon teal, Andrew?
Kind of the cheating way. I got one in Argentina this summer, but I've not gotten one north of the equator.
I'm a no on the cinnamon teal. My answer to that question is the elk. We hunted in the White River National Forest a couple years ago, and I have never been roundhouse kicked by a hunt so bad in my life. We trekked and trekked and trekked and trekked, and I'd seen elk. I'd been within 8 yards of a cow and 8 yards of a really good-sized bull moose that I accidentally called. That came to my cow call. Man, I just am so in awe of the power and amazing ability to handle that terrain that an elk has. Yeah. I mean, I was in great shape, huffing and puffing, just trying to keep up. And I throughout that week, I'd go to bed with the visions of a bull I had seen early in the week, and over the span of the week, I'd almost got to where like I had this different feeling about an animal than I'd ever had before, where like I was in its terrain. I was completely overwhelmed by its ability to survive and its conditioning and adaptations to that area, and actually ended up killing an elk, and then was completely overwhelmed by the process of carrying it off the mountain, and just the whole experience created this longing to go back. Like I think the elk is just I'm a flatlander, right? So, Andrew, you've seen and been around elk hunting a lot, but for me, like, man, what a neat animal! What an animal I could spend time after time and day after day waking up trying to find. And what I think it was I don't know that I've ever been on a hunt where I was so completely outfoxed and so completely overmatched, and just like, had it not been for a really, really lucky turn of circumstances, there's just no way I would have gotten an elk. And I was rifle hunting, just right in or after the rut, in the first season in Western Colorado, and so I mean, to say that I was outfoxed is an understatement, and I can't wait to go back. I too want to go and bow hunt. I think that's the probably really exciting way to do it. But it like the chucker you're talking about, where that animal is just at such an advantage in its home habitat versus you. It's almost like to call what we did chasing elk that week hunting, and then to go to a put and take pheasant hunt is so completely different. It's almost it really isn't even the same thing. Like, one was a hunt, like calling on all of your sensibilities as a person and all of your abilities as a person to try and chase that animal in its home range is something completely apart from a kick and shoot kind of rooster deal. And so I cannot wait until the next time I get to go.
Well, I'm amazed at how such a big animal can be so hard to see and find. It's just,
oh my gosh.
And it's one of those things. And honestly, almost every time we spotted bulls, it was their antlers that gave them away. We'd catch a glint, they'd turn, they'd move, or in a couple cases, their antlers were sticking up above the scrub oak, and we couldn't see anything else but the antlers. So, but for antlers, I don't know that some of those bulls we'd have been able to find.
Well, should we talk about guns for Christmas and bring this thing home so you can get on to your bathhouse Christmas party?
The steam is rising, if you know what I mean. I don't know what I mean. This is going to hit the streets, the gravel roads, just right before Christmas, and I think one of the things that we have in common is a love of guns, but also a love of giving guns, but maybe even more a love of getting guns. And I'm going to wager that each of us has a fond memory, or maybe just a memory, of getting a gun for Christmas. Dinger, I know you've got one.
Me and my brother matching Marlin 8 Model 70 22s. So it was when Marlin made a magazine, detachable magazine fed 22. We had a good idea that those two guns under the Christmas tree, or we had a good idea they were guns under the Christmas tree. They were just the right size. I was probably 12. My brother would have been about 8. And I have traded off that gun in order to buy another 22 years ago, but my brother still has his. And in fact, I slapped a scope on it recently, and that's what my son shot his first squirrel last year, and he shot it with my brother's 22 that my brother got for a Christmas present 30 years ago.
Pretty cool. All right, so mine's not a Christmas story, but I do want to tell the story of the one of my favorite gun stories, anyways. My first gun I got when I turned 12, which is probably the most exciting gift I've ever received. But here's a small stroke of genius from yours truly. So my wife is an accomplished business person, leader in our community, and not a feminist with the negative connotation, but just a feminist in terms of women are capable of equal and probably the way we all feel about it. And so being capable, equal, and very happy to tell me about it, I said that it's kind of BS that when a man gets engaged to a woman, the social norm is for the man to go and spend many thousands of dollars on a piece of jewelry for his bride-to-be. And then after, in the planning of a wedding, you're going to go and register for a bunch of gifts, many of which you need, all of which are what your wife wants, very, very few of which are coming from Home Depot or Cabela's and designed for the man's portion of the home. And so I was bringing this up, and I said, it's kind of BS. And if I'm going to go buy you a ring, I think that, the feminist in you should want to buy me something in return. So I'll buy you a ring if you agree to buy me a shotgun. And so she was like, yeah, I'll buy you a shotgun. So true to her word, we got engaged. awesome, fun day. Celebrated with friends. The next day, she went and bought me a Benelli 12 gauge Montefeltro shotgun. So there you go, listener. If you're not married yet, get yourself a shotgun out of it before you do.
Shotgun marriage.
Yeah.
If not wedding.
Yeah, it's in a great way. The shotgun engagement. We should patent that.
Patent pending.
Or make that a bad band name or something. Shotgun engagement. So that's my story. What about you, Mr. McKean?
Well, it's funny. I have a Christmas memory very close to Bronson's. My brother and I were gifted single shot 22s the same year. They were not matching. Mine was a Remington 510, just a single shot, little bolt action, long barreled booger. His was also a Remington. I've actually not researched the model. It's got a little kind of Springfield action where you got to pull back the cocking dial, and then safety is when you turn it to the right and it locks to fire it. You turn that cocking dial counterclockwise, I guess, and fire it. But anyway, the cool thing with it, those were both my grandfather's rifles. I had the good fortune to go back to the Remington, the original Remington plant in Ilya, New York, 5 or 6 years ago, and researched the date that my Remington 510 came off the manufacturing line, and it was 1951. The Erie Canal was still going. I can just imagine a pallet of those rifles being put, on the old Erie Canal and trading downstream to, Troy, New York, or maybe all the way down the Hudson and then distributed from there. But I still have that rifle. I have also kind of marred it up over time. I drilled and tapped it for a scope, but since then I've taken off the scope. It's got the notch and leaf sights, buckhorn sights, and my kids have all shot it. I think the bore is probably just shot out. I don't know how many tens of thousands of rounds I shot when I was a kid through that gun, but yeah, it still is probably my best Christmas present ever.
Pretty fun. Is that going in your hunter's will?
It's going in my hunter's will.
Patent
You bet.
pending.
I don't know which kid's going to get it. The interesting thing, 3 of my kids are all righties. I'm a lefty. That's a right-handed action. I'm sure they didn't make it as a lefty, but when I'm feeling particularly pissy, sometimes I'll kind of imagine who's going to get which gun. And I don't know who's getting that one.
Maybe you'll have a grandkid and you can solve it that way.
Oh, maybe.
See, that's the advantage of me only having one kid is, he's going to get them all.
He's going to get them all?
My dad and grandpa both have healthy gun collections, and I have only one request of my dad's living will, and that is that I get my grandpa's Model 12, my dad's Winchester 1300, because I also have, my first shotgun was Winchester 1300. So I'm going to buy my son the same gun for his first gun, and so hopefully one day he'll have his great-grandfather's grandfather's, mine, and his match set.
That's pretty cool.
Well, not to pervert this really kind of rosy discussion, but this is a little tactical kind of strategizing for any listener under a certain age. If there's a gun in your dad's or your mom's collection that you really want, start speaking up for it now. And it's going to come across that you're really, possessive of things, but actually the takeaway is the bequester will appreciate knowing that you're interested in that gun. Because otherwise, for those of us with multiple kids, it can actually kind of be a little bit of an issue. Like, who do we actually give it to? So if there's a gun you want, speak up for it while you still can.
Well, I had to give away my share of any inheritance that's remaining at the end of my dad's life to get that shotgun. So it's a fairly expensive thing to ask for, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, but if your dad dies and he has lots of debt, well, then you don't have to take the debt, right? All your Hey guys, I'm looking out my window right now, and there is a red fox right under my window. I don't know why I'm offering you that, because it's a podcast, no one can see it, but it's just gorgeous.
Well, and
Is
there's
this
a
set up
fox
for some
red.
sort of a joke?
There's a fox red lab at my feet that just farted. So if I don't make it to the end of this podcast, it's because I choked.
there's a red fox real estate in Glacicia, Montana.
Really?
There you have it.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we've probably kind of dipped the dregs out of the barrel. I'm going to go have a Christmas party.
You have a good Christmas party with the Men's Resource Center. I like to think of this episode as the anti-dead dog episode. So this was all happy and positive.
Yeah, we still have some makeups to do on that one. But I'd like to think though that if one episode is picked for the Library of Congress archive, it's not that one.
Good chance of that.
All right, fellas. Well, I think we can squeeze another one in before Christmas, but to all of our listeners, have a Merry, Merry Christmas. Try to give and get a gun this season. You'll remember it forever. Until next time, keep it on gravel.